One of the most famous symbols of Japan today has got to be that of the geisha. This seemingly ancient role is much more modern than many people may think, and it's actually still around today. These white-faced women are highly respected for their poise and skills in traditional Japanese arts. However, thanks to Hollywood and popular false rumors, they're greatly misunderstood by outsiders. Stay tuned to hear all about the truth of these mysterious women. Welcome to Crazy Histories, where we bring you the craziest and weirdest facts from human history. Some of the things discussed in this video may be offensive or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. First and foremost, it's important to note that geishas are not prostitutes or courtesans. While there are a few instances from Japan's Edo period of geishas sleeping with clients, this was not a common thing. Geishas are strictly performance artists. This misconception that geisha are prostitutes likely came about after World War II. During this time, many prostitutes dressed in traditional geisha clothing and advertised themselves as geishas to the occupying forces. This would have led the men to believe that they were sleeping with geishas. They then would have spread this belief, leading it to become a popular belief. This, however, does not make it true. Geishas in history. The word geisha can be directly translated as person of the arts and used to be only used to refer to an entertainer in Tokyo. In the city of Kyoto, they were called geiko, which means young entertainer. And in the western cities and towns of Japan, they were called jiji, which translates to artistic woman. Today, though, geisha is used for these entertainers across Japan. Unlikely as it may seem, geishas did not used to be women. Before the 17th century, the role was held exclusively by men. The role they held was a bit different from that of a modern geisha. Back then, they performed a similar role to European jesters, entertaining the lords with dancing and stories. They were not called geishas then, but they were called takemochi or hakan. The mid-17th century saw a shift in society, though, and the takemochi were no longer needed to entertain the lords and so moved to the pleasure districts where they performed for the general public. It was around this time that the word geisha became the popular word to describe the entertainers. Then, by the time the 18th century came around, women also began to perform in the pleasure districts alongside the male geisha. They were much more popular than the men, and by the 19th century, the job was almost only given to women. The takemochi were again forced to change their role, and now they're seen as a supporting role to the women geisha. There are still a few takemochi today, but it's not a common role. Geishas were hired as entertainment for private parties. However, they could also be seen performing at public festivals. Most often, though, geishas worked in tea houses. They would have been hired to entertain their clients with dance, singing, music, conversation, and their hosting skills. In order for an individual to be able to book a geisha for the first time, he'd had to have a referral from an existing client of the geisha's household. It was also quite expensive to rent the time of a geisha, costing several $100s just for a few hours of the woman's time. If a wealthy man was particularly fond of a specific geisha, he could pay to be her patron, called a dana. A dana would pay to fully support the geisha's lifestyle in exchange for the geisha agreeing not to be hired by anyone else. It took an immense amount of wealth for a man to become a dana. These types of relationships could occasionally turn romantic or sexual, but nearly always the dana and the geisha maintained a platonic relationship. Danas are incredibly rare today because of the cost and because the women don't like to be bound to just one patron. They prefer the freedom of entertaining whomever they like. The Geisha Look. It's easy to spot a geisha when you see one. Their looks are distinctive. They wear long kimonos, traditional hairstyles, and specific makeup. Today, the makeup is purely traditional. However, back before the tea houses that geishas worked in had electricity, the makeup helped to brighten their faces. The shocking white ashiroi powder would be brightly illuminated by the candlelight, allowing patrons to more easily see the woman's faces. It can take up to an hour every day for each geisha to achieve this iconic look, and it must be applied fresh every day. Before the makeup is put on, a sort of primer is used on a geisha's face to help smooth her face out. This is a layer of wax called bintsuki abura. Next, a geisha will mix a white powder called oshiroi with water to make a paste that she then spreads over her face, neck, and back. The oshiroi used to be a lead-based powder which caused many health issues. Nowadays, it's made from much safer ingredients like talc or cornstarch. Following the oshiroi, a woman puts on a distinctive red lipstick called bene, black eyeliner, and a reddish type of eyeshadow. The geisha's makeup is completed with dark and defined eyebrows. Once her makeup is finally done, a geisha could continue her routine by putting on and styling her wig and getting dressed in her kimono. How to become a geisha? Before a woman can be called geisha, she has to go through years of intense training. During this time, she is called a meiko, which means woman of dance. This training lasts about 5 years and includes learning to play traditional Japanese instruments, singing and dancing lessons, learning the traditional tea ceremony, and learning proper etiquette for entertainment. Along with these skills, a meiko learns about other traditional Japanese traditions such as calligraphy, flower arranging, poetry, and literature. Typically, a woman's training begins at a very young age, possibly as young as 3 years old. Today, though, training begins when she's between 15 and 18 years old. Once she finishes her training in her early 20s, she's presented with a kimono and elaborate wig, two symbols of a geisha. Toward the end of her training, a meiko attends work with the fully fledged geisha so she can get some hands-on experience. Because they're styled in a similar way to the geisha, it can be difficult for patrons to spot the difference between the two groups of women. There are some differences, though, in how they present themselves. The first is in the lipstick they wear. While both groups wear the same color, a geisha will paint all of her lips, while a meiko will just wear it on her bottom lip. The second main difference in their looks is their hair. Geishas wear elaborate wigs in what is called the shimada style. Meiko, however, have several different hairstyles that they might wear that are created from their own hair. The most common hairstyle is a style bun that will change as she gets older to denote her rank. The final big difference between meiko and geisha is the style of kimono that a woman wears. A geisha will generally wear a more refined dress than a meiko. On the other hand, the kimono that meikos wear have longer sleeves, more colorful designs, and larger sashes than a geisha's kimono. Once a woman becomes a geisha, she commits to staying single while she has her job. Once a woman marries, she's forced to retire from the job. If a geisha never marries, then she may retire at her leisure and become either an okuzan or a music or dance teacher. Geisha districts and houses. Both geisha and meiko live in lodging houses that are called okiya. These houses are run by an okuzan, who is like a house mother. The okuzan is nearly always a retired geisha who took over after the last house mother stepped down. The house mother is in charge of managing training, clothing, room, and board for the meika. As you can imagine, this can get quite expensive, and so the okuzan takes all of the money that the meikos make during their training to cover their costs and gives them just a small allowance. Even after a meiko is promoted to a geisha, she often still owes money to the okiya and okuzan. Once she's paid these debts, her earnings are her own. While meiko are allowed to stay at the okiya after getting promoted to geisha, they don't have to stay there. However, regardless of if the geisha lives in the okiya or not, geisha always get ready for a performance inside of the okiya they were trained in. Modern geishas. It's estimated that there are about 1,000 geishas still living and working in Japan today. About half of these are living and working in Kyoto, though there are geisha districts in the cities of Tokyo, Kanazawa, Niigata, and Hachioji. Although the geisha are an international symbol of Japan, it's not a requirement for a geisha to be Japanese. In fact, there have been quite a few famous and successful geisha from China, Eastern Europe, and United States, and even as far away as Peru. It's much easier today to experience a geisha than it was in the past. Many okiya partner with travel agencies and hotels, allowing tourists to book a number of packages, including dining with or just watching a performance. This is especially true in Kyoto, where geisha culture is bigger than in any other part of Japan. It might be easier nowadays to book a performance, but you'll still need to pay the same premium rate. Keep in mind that it's usually not a full geisha that performs at these types of performances, and is generally a meiko. If you have your heart set on watching a geisha specifically and not a meiko, your best option is to visit Kyoto during one of the 5 Odari dance festivals. These are held throughout the year and will feature meiko and geisha from different okiya performing on stage together. It's estimated that at the height of the geisha's popularity, there were more than 80,000 women working in this role. However, that number has drastically fallen through the 20th century, and now it's estimated that there are just around 1,000 left. So how would you like to watch a geisha performance? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more historical videos.